we understand that stigma, just like mental health has a stigma. I think domestic violence has even a bigger stigma because it can have repercussions for whoever brings it up. You
That's
know,
true.
somebody doesn't want to be brought up in that they are guilty of that, because there are ramifications for that.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
understand the stigma of people not wanting to even mention it.
right.
Uh,
And listen, bringing up anything when it comes to family, you have to be careful. Even if you want to, incest. So,
yes,
and that's, that's another. I'm thinking we tackle, and it sounds funny. Let's tackle homosexuality, and I don't mean it in that way, but I think we do need to talk about it because we don't talk about it enough, and be honest from both sides. I think a lot of times I have a tendency, just to speak for me personally, to hold my opinion and just allow people to say whatever, because I'm like, I'm not a part of that community, but I can't do that anymore and so just be like, F them, I'm not a part of that community. We need to talk about it. we,
very
we, we
true.
have to talk about it.
You ready? I'm ready to do a countdown.
Yes, it's gonna be okay.
Four,
Okay.
three, two,
Okay. It's gonna be okay.
Recording in progress.
Mhm.
uh,
Welcome, 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 everyone. This is PC from Paula's Purse, where the bag is always filled with topics to discuss. Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year. Hey, man, let me just say this. We're going to do it a little bit differently tonight. Normally, I have my topics, my grab bag. But what I wanted to do this evening was to take tonight and then our next show just to focus on domestic violence, just to focus on it so we can talk about it. The numbers are going up right here in Houston. Just we have to talk about it. I've got some my own personal stories that I want to share. I've got stories other people have been calling me ever since we posted on Facebook and YouTube that we were going to speak about domestic violence. So I want to put that out there. And once again, welcome everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the show. Normally, all right, I talk about happy topics, happy discussions. We talk about things that make you feel good, make you smile. But sometimes I throw out some topics that we're gonna discuss that might make you cry, might force you to look at yourself, might force you to look at someone else. And so tonight, this is gonna be one of those nights. Now I'm gonna tell you this. If you happen to see me crying, if you happen to see tears rolling down my face, it's okay. It's okay. All right. I'm a crier. Most of you don't know me, but you'll find out as you tune in more often. I cry because it is good for me, and I went to therapy and I did anger management. So now when I talk, I'm not coming from a place of I don't feel bad. I'm not blaming myself. I'm not even blaming the other person because that's one of the things that you do when you go to therapy. You have to forgive because forgiving them is a nugget for yourself. You know what I mean? You ever hear sometimes when I hear it in movies all the time. I hear people saying it all the time. Like if I was the one that was raped, why is he out there living his best life? I have to forgive. You got to forgive so you can begin to live your best life. Because if you don't forgive, you just walking around holding on to everything. All right. So that's why I push anger management and therapy all the time. All right. So domestic violence. We're going to get into it. All right. Now, sometimes you'll see me tilting my head a little bit. It's because I'm also recording from my phone because, we are live Facebook, Zoom, and YouTube. All right. I wrote this down, and I remember I wrote this down years ago. The first time I had been beaten by a man, I wrote down on a piece of paper that everyone deserves relationships free from domestic violence. Everyone deserves that. And I'm going to say it again. Everyone deserves relationships free from domestic violence. All right, so let's just jump into domestic violence.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
What is domestic violence?
I'm jumping right into it. All right. Domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and or abusive behavior as a part of a systemic pattern of power and control perpetuated by one intimate partner against another. And that is what domestic violence is. I'm going to read it one more time. Domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and or abusive behavior as part of a systemic pattern of power and control perpetuated by one intimate partner against another. And it's simple as that. Now, 18% of all, well, how do I want to say this? Domestic violence makes up 18% of homicide cases. Okay. 73% of those domestic violent cases, the person uses a gun to murder someone. 95% of the time, the person who picks up the gun or the knife, it's a man. The other 5% of the time, it's a woman, but she doesn't normally use a gun. She may use a gun. She may use a frying pan, but she doesn't normally pick up a gun. That is usually done solely by men. All right, now I'm going to go back to what I just read to you about domestic violence, okay? Physical violence, emotional, verbal abuse, sexual assault, financial abuse, digital abuse. Now, these are all the things that you will experience when you're in an abusive relationship, someone that's violent. These are all the things that I have experienced. Now, let's just go back and just tackle one at a time. Physical violence, well, we know what that is. Someone punching you, slapping you, kicking you, biting you, choking you, or using a weapon. Weapons. Emotional, verbal abuse would be name calling, criticizing, you acting possessive. You know how your man or your woman may not want you to be around your family, may not want you to do a whole lot of talking. I dated this guy. Turns out he was bisexual. Gay ass. But anyway, his name was Byron. He was always trying to control me, trying to control what I say. Like we would go somewhere, and if there was a crowd of us, he would nudge me whenever I got ready to say something. Like he didn't want me to, he just wanted to control everything, every aspect of me when we were together. Emotional, verbal abuse, name calling, acting possessive, criticizing. Sexual abuse, well, we know what that is. Insults in sexual manner, sexual acts, wanting me to do some stuff that I may not want to do, right? I got a good example for you. As I'm going to use my life experiences on this topic. I just told you that I was dating a guy named Byron. Turns out he was bisexual, right? He was trying to coach me into going to a swingers party, right? And I was like, okay, if I go, I'm not gonna do anything. And then we were going back and forth about it. I was like, man, I don't want to go to a swingers party. I'm not sleeping with a woman. I don't want to see what I don't want to see acts men on men or women on women or whatever. And he was continuing, I mean, for like 2 years, just trying to coach me into it. So that's a part of the sexual abuse. Before you even get abused, they want to try to control you, your thoughts, what you want to do, where you want to go, what you want to wear. All right, the next one is financial abuse. And that's self-explanatory. Somebody, say the person you're dating, maybe y'all married, maybe y'all live together, he controls all the money, you have no access to it. That's financial abuse. Or vice versa. Maybe she's controlling and you don't have access to anything. Maybe she's opening up credit cards in your name. You can't say anything about it. Just in charge of the finances. You don't even have a debit card or a credit card. You have to go through your spouse or your significant other to purchase something in the store. That's financial abuse. Why does someone else need to be in charge like that? That's ridiculous. And the last one is digital abuse. Online, YouTube, Facebook, X, someone controlling you and telling you who you can follow, who you can't follow, watching your every move online. You know, people do that on Facebook all the time. Watch everything that you do. That's digital abuse. It's someone, and here is the thing, someone wanting to be in control of you, taking your power and taking the control and wanting to run everything. That's all a part of domestic violence. All right, I'm going to say this before I go any further. I think this was December 1st. From December 1st to where we are today, this is January 9th. There have just been case after case after case of domestic violence. And one case that kind of touched me, and I watched it again today, and I'm going to say this young lady's name. I don't know if you guys happen to have seen this on the news, but there was a gentleman and his wife and their 8-year-old daughter at home. And the father began to stab the mother in the bathroom, stabbed her to death, to death. And I found out today that he actually stabbed her 60 times. 60, not six. He stabbed her 60 times. Then it says in the paperwork that I read that he began to stab himself. Right? There was a knock at the door. The police was at the front door. They were ringing the doorbell, and the 8-year-old daughter walked downstairs, and she opened the door, and the police asked her where was her mother and father, and she said, "Daddy is upstairs stabbing mom to death." And that, man, that really grab my water. That really that affected me. And I'd read about the story the day that it happened. I went back and read it again. I read the story again today. And it touched me some kind of way. And I'm gonna tell you why. Well, you already know. I've been into, as I said, two really bad relationships where the person was physically abusive to me, and I survived. But Miss Robin Simpson, who was stabbed 60 times, she didn't make it. She didn't make it. And now there's some questions about from the time that the call was made to the house to the time that the police actually went in, because while this dude was upstairs stabbing his wife to death, the police, they were just all outside the front door. There seemed to be no sense of urgency um, to go in and help. So I guess this asshole, he caught himself after he stabbed his wife 60 times. He began to stab himself.
May I
Yes, sir.
speak? There is nothing to say other than there are some very insecure men, and some men get to the point. Obviously, this gentleman, I really qualify calling him a gentleman, but he got to the point where he didn't want to live no more. Or because if you go through that with something like that in your mind, you would already have given up your. You don't mind giving up your life.
Right.
And I would say, I have two daughters. You have daughters. I would ask the daughters really to take a second to look at how a gentleman deals with a certain amount of adversity. You know, people calling him names
Yeah.
or anything that is an adverse thing that he has to be able to deal with. If he can't deal with some criticism or different things, he has a real problem with that. I would be very careful with that. But
That is
that's
true.
just one aspect.
That is
There's
true.
a lot of guys that, put on a very good mask,
Mm-hmm.
but behind that mask, they have a real insecure, domineering mentality.
That is
And
true.
it's very hard to really just figure it out. I talked to one lady and I asked her, why do ladies end up with these guys that do this? And her simple answer was, we don't know before we know.
We don't know. Yeah.
And I can understand that. But I would hope that there are certain signs that we can look at that are obvious, but there are some situations that are not obvious and you won't know until you know. So
Well,
that's my idea.
thank you, Baruti, and that's why I went over. I gave you the definition. I gave everyone the definition of domestic violence, and that's why I mentioned physical violence, emotional and verbal abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, and digital abuse. And the reason why I gave you those examples, I gave you the meaning of those so that you can see it. You can begin to recognize it as you go out and you begin to conversate with, people, men and women. Um, because what I'm saying now, if someone had shared that with me 5 years ago, it would have helped me, or 10 years ago, it would have helped me. Because when you're in a relation, I'm going to go with I because I don't like the we. When I was in a relationship with someone that was physically abusive, nothing made sense. Nothing made sense. If you're in when I was in a relationship and everything's going right, and the person's always looking for something to go wrong, that's one sign. That's a sign. Some people don't want happiness. Some people's life isn't good unless there's a problem. And you have to be able to recognize it. You have to be able to recognize when someone's trying to control you. Someone's trying to control your money. Someone's trying to control your phone. When I dated this, as I said, Byron, the bisexual guy, um, he had a tendency to remove my phone, put my phone in his pocket, or put my phone somewhere else other than where I may have sat it. So that's a form of control. And domestic violence is all about power and control. So you have to be able to recognize it. You guys know Shamari. Shamari had this thing where he would bite me in my back, and that's very painful because you don't do anything with your back. So to get bit there, it is, it's not a good feeling. And so that was the beginning of the abuse with him. On top of lies, people cheating. And so it's really hard when you're in a relationship and the person isn't who they really are. You know what I mean? You take them at their word until something happens. They start screaming and hollering, and there's no reason to scream and holler. And you're like, wait a minute, what is this person's problem? Let me tell you what happened one time with me. And once again, I recognize it now, everything now, because I'm by myself, I'm single, and I can look back and evaluate things. And I'm like, oh, okay. Now, this is what happened one evening. It wasn't anything bad, but it was all a part of power and control. One person trying to take power and control from another person. So Byron and I, we pull up to the convenience store one evening and we're sitting in the truck. I'm not driving, I'm on the passenger side. But I noticed on my side, there is there's a Range Rover parked there. And I looked over there because that truck was there when we pulled up, but no one had gotten out of the truck or come out of the store to get back in the truck. So I looked over there like, I wonder what's going on in that vehicle. And that's all I was thinking. I didn't even say it out loud. So it's so weird because we're sitting in the truck, and when the person opens the door in the Range Rover, I looked because I wanted to see who was sitting in that truck so long and wasn't going anywhere. I'll never forget it. This is what Byron did to me. Now he's sitting on the passenger side. So he took his hand and brought my face all the way back to where he was. I didn't even pay attention to that. Right? I didn't pay attention to it. That was control right there. That was the beginning of it. I didn't, you know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, and like I said, when one time we were at a store, I was going to buy something, and he nudged me as I was speaking to the gentleman that was going to help behind the counter. Control. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't know. I didn't have anyone to tell me. My mother and my father were physically abusive to each other, but my mother never shared any of those stories with me. She never shared with me what to look for. And so my sister and I went through um we went through relationships that we could have avoided if if my mother had said something. That's why I speak to my girls and my son, because I don't want to be uh, silent and cause my girls to go through life being suffering Sallies, where they're in relationships where they feel like they can't talk, they can't tell someone, and life doesn't get any better than the person that's with you who has taken your power and control. So that's another reason why we're doing the show. I did want to say also, I mentioned homosexuality. Well, I shouldn't say homosexuality. LGBTQ plus community, because when it comes to domestic violence, they make up about 12%. And on Christmas Day, you guys familiar with Mesa Road over Mesa and Tidwell over by Smiley? On Christmas, this young lady, well, she looked like she might have been in her 50s or whatever, older, like my age, black lady, Portia Phillips. She killed her wife. They got into an argument on Christmas Day. She shot her wife in the head, blew her head off.
I'd like to say this.
Yes, sir.
If people cannot accept loss, defeat, those are signs you get. You know, like when you're playing a basketball game
Mm-hmm.
and somebody, you start beating them, they take their ball
Mm-hmm.
to stop the game. Or they start cheating, or it starts to be a real big conflict because you're beating them at a game. It could be any game. You could be playing cards and they don't want you to win.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are signs you got to say, okay, if you're getting this upset about a game, you're getting this upset, it could be a conversation.
Yeah.
And you are very, you're very talkative, you're very good at the conversation, you're very intelligent in the conversation. Some men cannot handle that.
That is true.
And they want you to be subservient in the conversation all the time.
That is true.
They don't want you to be presented you're smarter than them, and they can't handle that.
You know, hold on.
Guys that go through that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish that.
I'm just saying, those are different signs. My daughter has mentioned to me that, she's, of course, the breadwinner. Mm-hmm. He's on the surface a good gentleman, but he's going through issues of not having a job.
Yeah.
Which might be harder for a young man to get. However, sometimes you got to lower your standards of where you are to get to where you want to be.
That is true.
And the male pride is a little bit harder to, and I shouldn't say it's just a male thing, but it is a male thing. Mm-hmm. Because we get taught we're supposed to be the breadwinner, we're supposed to be in charge, all of this machoism.
Yeah.
And it makes it difficult for a young man to accept working at Burger King or McDonald's if they are not matured enough to know I got to do what I got to do to help my family or my loved one to survive. And it's bigger than my pride. I might have to lower my pride for a second, or just lower the perception that maybe I am generating to others.
Right.
You got to realize it's about what goes on in the circle of your family, not what others see. And a lot of people get caught up. Hey, I can't let her be telling me what to do, especially if other people know that she's talking to me like this. Sometimes you can't get caught up into all that.
That is true.
You want to have your pride, you want to have your strength, but understand that there are balances, there are different things that you sometimes have to shut up and take it, even if you may not want to.
Yeah.
And as you go along as a strong man, and a part of being strong is being able to bring something to the table, to bring, when all the Indians brought the, they had their civilization.
Right.
Some brought corn, some brought sticks for the fire. You got to bring something to the table to help support.
That is true.
You can't just be there yourself and that's enough. In this world, you have to bring something to the table. A lot of young men don't want to lower themselves to do what they have to do to make their family work.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I didn't mean to cut you off. When you said something, it triggered something in my psyche, because I remember, and it's so weird now that you said that, because I have a tendency And I think it was just how I grew up around the men in the family. But whenever I'm around men, I have a tendency to not talk and only talk if someone asks me something. Let's say, for example, I'm here at home, and say if my brothers were here, my brothers and their friends, I wouldn't get involved in the conversation unless they said something to me. But that was just weird that you triggered something. You triggered something in me. I want to share this statistic that I got. It says one study of American football found that upset losses correlated with 10% increase in domestic violence reported after football games. One study of American football found that upset losses correlated with a 10% increase in domestic violence reported after the game. Now, I knew this, I've known this for years. Coming out of Halloween, people getting prepared for Thanksgiving, which means you getting prepared for Christmas. You know, our kids are grown, so I don't have to do any of that anymore, thank God. But people have a tendency to, and I don't like to blame domestic violence on overspending, but that it happens. People have a tendency to overspend, and they have a tendency to fight because somebody's decided to overspend. And also, when men, not just men, but when people bet on games, it's more so men than women. But when they bet on their football team and their team lose, they have a tendency to get arrested. They get arrested and their wife beat her. And my friend said, well, why you call it a wife beater? Because he usually gets arrested in that's the shirt he's wearing. That's the t-shirt. He has already come out of his regular shirt, right? That's why they call it the wife beater, because he beat her in that and he got arrested in that. Let me throw this out there for you. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Judge Frank Aguilar. I don't know if you guys are keeping up with the news or if you heard anything, but Judge Aguilar is a judge in criminal court. I'm not sure if it was 152nd or 172nd court, but he got arrested, right? He got arrested for. So let me set it up for you. So his home is in Galveston, right? He's a judge. He rents out one of his rooms, Airbnb type. So he and his girlfriend, they're there at the house along with the people who have rented out the room, and everybody's drinking and doing whatever, but they're definitely drinking, according to the police who went out to the house. But he ended up beating his girlfriend and then putting his foot on her neck. I'm like, you beat your girlfriend up and then you put your foot on her neck. And because she is of a different persuasion, her color is not like mine. The police could clearly see his footprint on the girl's neck. The print on her neck, and then the bruises under her eyes. So they were talking about if the judge needs to step down, would he be fair in criminal cases when he has his own criminal case? But I just wanted to throw that out there. Let me share this too. This happened on Christmas Day. There's a family at home right here in Houston, getting prepared for Christmas. House all decorated with the Christmas tree and the gifts. And let's go back. 11 days before this lady was murdered, mother of three was murdered, she called the police and told the police what was going on in her house and how
I think she actually went to the police station.
She went and she called.
Okay.
She called. She went to the police station, and I'm bringing this up for two reasons. because I got the same response. I got the same response. So what they told me is what they tell everybody. Person has to do something. You know, we can't, ma'am, we can't do anything until he hits you. That's what they told me. I'm just thankful that I'm here to share because Robin Simpson didn't make it. She was stabbed 60 times, and this mother of three, she didn't make it. He killed her, the husband killed her before he killed himself. And that's so selfish because you already have it in your mind as to what you want to do. Why not just take yourself?
I'm glad he didn't take the kids also.
Well, it's just like, all right, I want to read something to you guys because I think we have kind of gotten away. I would say those of us who call ourselves Christians, we have gotten away from the Ten Commandments. We've just gotten away from, and I say we now because we are a community, we are a people, and everybody that I just told you who killed somebody or shot somebody, those are all black people. I'm going to read the Ten Commandments, and it says God laws protect us. Now, there was a lot going on before the Ten Commandments came down to Moses, right? It was a lot going on. And so I think God was like, hey, y'all need something. You need something because people are doing whatever, however, whenever. Just like we are today. Just like we are today. But I wanted to share this because I think if we get back to just one thing, if we get back to just doing one thing within our community, within our home, within our family, within the relationships that we deem to be important, there's one thing we have to get back to. All right, so the Ten Commandments. Let's just start anywhere. Thou shalt not steal, right? Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not kill. Honor your mother and father. And that's honor your mother and father because if you don't, your own days will be numbered. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Stop lying, is what that means. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. You shall have no other gods or deities before me. Now, I think if you apply this to your life, if you just apply these 10 things to your life, you'll be okay. But this is what Jesus said, right? I went to John 15, 12, 13. John chapter 15, verse 12 through 13. And this is what Jesus said. And it's so simple. Greater love has no one than this. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this: to lay down one's life for one's friends. Again, Jesus tells disciples to love one another as he loved them. Well, if I look at the 10 Commandments, well, if I just apply what Jesus said and just love, then I wouldn't do any of those. You know what I mean? I'm not going to kill. I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to covet someone else's husband. I'm going to wait for my husband to come my way. And here is another thing I wanted to tell everybody. Stop saying this right here. I swear to God. How do you swear and put God in the same sentence. It's okay to swear if you choose to swear. I just don't use it. But stop saying I swear to God. I mean, it makes no sense at all. I wanted to throw that out there. Let me say this. If you are from the north side of town, if you are familiar with North Forest School District, and let's just say you might be, if you are 50 and up, or maybe 55 and up, you might be familiar with this story. I'm going to share this with you. And I'm not going to, someone asked me why would I mention this story, because it affected me indirectly. And I'm still hurt. I didn't realize how hurt I was until I started writing the show, and brought up some feelings that I didn't realize that I had saved and put in a box. So my mother and my father were good friends with the Gullies. Okay, my mother and my father. My father was a football player. Um, my father actually was going to play for the Dallas Cowboys, and he blew his knee out. But my father was good friends with Mr. Gully, who was a football coach, and his wife, Mary Gully. She was air traffic control, right? So they had a very big, nice home over there off Tidwell. They had three children, three boys. I am the youngest of four, so their oldest son saw me grow up from the time I was born till I became an adult. So, like I said, Mr. Gully was a football teacher. His wife had a really good job, and they were making 250,000 plus a year. And their oldest son, Big Bill, he was a football player. Their middle son, Val, and then their youngest son, Vincent. So they had three boys. And my mother would go over there often, even after my parents divorced. Miss Gully and my mother were still really good friends, all the way until Miss Gully died a couple of years back. But we would go to their home, and just outside looking in, beautiful, beautiful home. Mother and father have good jobs. I would go there with my mother, and we would stay sometimes for a couple of days because they'd be playing cards and dominoes and all this stuff. And their home was one home that I always felt safe because I was touched as a child inappropriately. So whenever we would go to their home, I was always ecstatic. I loved it. Big home, and nobody bothered me, and I could have whatever I want, take my shoes off, and be comfortable. So fast forward to some years, I remember my mother took me over to Miss Gully's house. I had just gotten back from college. Now I'll never forget it. I remember seeing Bill, and he did a double take when he saw me. Keep in mind, he has known me since I was born. Then here I am coming back home from college, and he gave me that double look, that double take, and it kind of made me feel like, oh, I must be beautiful now. But it was a really good feeling, and I love this family. Now, but the reason why I bring up the story is because I got a phone call from my mother one day, and she said, "What are you doing? You need to sit down." And I said, "Okay, no problem. I'll sit down." So I sat down, and I said, I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "You won't believe what happened." And I said, "What happened?" So If you guys went to Forest Brook with me, you remember Big Bill Wyatt, right? You remember very nice, smart guy, played football. He was real big, had knock knees, very kind heart. Well, Big Bill Wyatt had the same stature as Bill Gully. So that's who he always reminded me of, just to give you a picture for those of you who went to school with me. But Bill felt as though his wife was cheating on him. And I don't know, I can't give my opinion on that. But what happened one day was he decided that he was going to follow his wife. And so she was in her car and he was in his car, and he followed her all day until he found out whatever he needed to find out. Okay, so he believed that she was cheating on him. And because he believed she was cheating on him, and I don't know, maybe he found what he needed to find out that day, but he approached her. He stopped his car. She stopped her. When he saw where she was, he stopped his car and he approached her. And I don't know what he may have said to her, but he blew her head off, completely off. Then he got back in his car, and I'm not sure where he was. I'm not sure where he was headed to, if he was headed back to his parents' house or wherever, but he never made it because he blew his head completely off. And it
Thank you,
just,
Ted.
what'd you say?